Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, Kangaroo ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shishi Koranitai, Maya Pashashi ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Haribol. So this is about the Akadashi today? Oh, this is the calendar beginning again, eh? Shri Govinda Ghosh. Shri Govinda Ghosh was known for his sweet kirtans at the annual Jagannath Rath Yatra festival. He and his two brothers, Vasudev and Madhava, are eternal associates of Shri Chaitanya and Shri Nityananda. The Lord would immediately begin dancing whenever the Ghosh brothers would sing. The Ghosh brothers preached throughout their lives with music and song. Shri Govinda Ghosh established the Gopinath temple in Agra Dweep. Since he had no children, Govinda wondered who would perform his funeral rites. Shri Gopinath. Shishi Kodanitai Maya Pashashi Ki Jai. Shri Gopinath, his deity, appeared in a dream promising that he himself would do everything. Still today, the Gopinath deity arranges for the Tirobhav Mahotsava disappearance day of his pure devotee. As Kalavati Saki, Govinda Ghosh sings sweetly for Radha Govinda and Goloka Vrindavan. His samadhi is in Vrindavan. Is that loud enough? Yeah? Okay. And of course, it's also a Kadashi today. Parchamuchan. Oh, Papa Mochani. Akadashi, okay. So reading from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to understand why they should distribute his books, and he instructed them throughout his letters. Who God is can be summed up in only 5 words. Krishna is the supreme controller. If you become convinced of this and preach it enthusiastically, success is assured, and you will be doing the greatest service for all living entities. He wrote to Jayadvaita, these books and magazines are our most important propaganda weapons to defeat the ignorance of Maya's army. And the more we produce such literature and sell them profusely all over the world, the more we shall deliver the world from the suicide course. So it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada is referring to his books, which are Shastra, to Astra, which is a weapon. So very similar, Shastra and Astra. To Jagadish he wrote, I am encouraged to see your report of books sold because it proves that you consider it your responsibility to see that more and more people are reading our literature. So it's not just passing out the books, we've got to get them to read them as well. We've got to read them as well. So the challenge is, can you pass out the books and get people to read them as well? Actually, this is the solid basis for our preaching work. No other movement has got such profuse authority for preaching. And if someone reads our Krishna conscious philosophy, he becomes convinced. Prabhupada continued to insist that all major Krishna conscious programs be maintained, including deity worship, chanting Hare Krishna in public, and holding outside lectures. All programs were important, but book distribution, whenever possible, should accompany the other programs. That's interesting. So Prabhupada wanted book distribution to accompany deity worship, chanting Hare Krishna in public, and holding outside lectures. To a sannyasi whose main program was public lecturing, Prabhupada wrote, "Distribute books as many as possible. If anyone hears some philosophy from us, that will help him. But if he purchases one book, that may turn his life. So selling books is the best preaching activity. Sell books, hold the kirtan in public places like schools, colleges, and preach." So the benefit of giving somebody a book is if you tell somebody they're a fool, they may be offended. But if they read in the book, "You are a fool," then they can take that easy, you see. False ego, there's nobody watching. You are a fool and you are wasting your life. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord. And it's text 51, 52. Loke vitatam atmanam. Loka vitatam atmana. Lokam chatmani santatam. Lokam chatmani santatam. Ubayam cha maya vyaptam. Ubayam cha maya vyapta. Mai chaivo bhayam kritam. Mai chaivo bhayam kritam. Loke vitatam atmanam. Lokam chatmani santatam. Ubayam chamaya vyaptam. Mai chaivo bhayam kritam. Loke vitatam atmanam. Lokam chatmani santatam. Ubayam chamaya vyapta. Mai chaivo bhyam kritam. Loka vitatam atmanam. Loka chatmani santatam. Ubayam chamaya vyapta. Mayo chaivo bhayam kritam. Loka vitatam atmanam. Lokam chatmani santatam. Ubayam chamaya vyapta. Mai chaivo bhayam kritam. Loke vitatam atmanam. Satatam. Loke, in this material world, vitatam, expanded in the spirit of material enjoyment. Atmanam, the living entity. Lokam, the material world. Cha, also. Atmani, in the living entity. Santatam, spread. Ubhayam, both the material world of material elements and the living entity. Cha, and. Maya, by me. Vyaptam, pervaded. Mai, in me. Cha, also. Eva, indeed. Ubayam, both of them. Kritam, created. Translation: in this world of matter, which the conditioned soul accepts as consisting of enjoyable resources, the conditioned soul expands, thinking that he is the enjoyer of the material world. Similarly, the material world expands in the living entity as a source of enjoyment. In this way, they both expand. But because they are my energies, they are both pervaded by me. As the Supreme Lord, I am the cause of these effects, and one should know that both of them rest in me. Responsively, please. In this world of matter, which the conditioned soul accepts as consisting of enjoyable resources, the conditioned soul expands, thinking that he is the enjoyer of the material world. Similarly, the material world expands in the living entity as a source of enjoyment. In this way, they both expand. But because they are my energies, they are pervaded by me. As the Supreme Lord, I am the cause of these effects. And one should know that both of them rest in me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Mayavad philosophy sees everything as being equal in quality with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the Supreme Brahman, and therefore sees everything as worshipful. This dangerous theory of the Mayavad school has turned people in general toward atheism. On the strength of this theory, one thinks that he is God, but this is not a fact. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina. The fact is that the entire cosmic manifestation is an expansion of the Supreme Lord's energies, which are manifested in the physical elements and the living entities. Living entities wrongly consider the physical elements to be resources meant for their enjoyment, and they think themselves to be the enjoyers. However, neither of them is independent. They are both energies of the Lord. The original cause for the material energy and spiritual energy is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, although the expansion of the Lord's energies is the original cause, one should not think that the Lord himself has expanded in different ways. To condemn the theories of the Mayavadis, the Lord clearly says in Bhagavad Gita, Matstani Sarvabhutani Nachaham Tesh Avishtita. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. Everything rests upon him, and everything is but an expansion of his energies. But this does not mean that everything is as worshipful as the Lord himself. The material expansion is temporary, but the Lord is not temporary. Living entities are parts of the Lord, but they are not the Lord himself. The living entities in this material world are not inconceivable. The Lord is. Knowing that the Lord's energies, being expansions of the Lord, are as good as the Lord, is mistaken. Om Agana Timiranda Shagananyana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swabadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is Lord Sankishan now speaking to King Chitraketu, who's just offered some very beautiful prayers. The Lord is very pleased with him, and so now he is explaining his position for the benefit of Maharaj Chitraketu and everyone that hears it afterwards. So Srila Prabhupada considers Mayavad philosophy to be dangerous because this leads to atheism. So that's interesting. It's a dangerous theory. There's a verse as well by Lord Chaitanya where he says, if you hear Mayavad philosophy, then you are doomed and you have to run into the Ganges, which is quite a distance from Les Mahego. You probably have to keep a wetsuit on. So the dangerous theory has 10 people toward atheism. There's another reason Srila Prabhupada explains in the first canto why Mayavad has 10 people to atheism. When he's talking about the Adiras. You know that point that he makes? The Adiras, the original Ras is Radharani and Krishna. And because people are being told, well, actually, the ultimate is nothing, then they see material sex life, the original Adiras, they see that as the all in all. So then they become atheists because they think, well, I'm better off here in the material world than with this. At least I get this. If I give this up, I've got nothing. So indirectly, it emphasizes atheism. Whereas we say, no, this is a perverted reflection. What you're running around for here in the material world is there in its pristine form in the Adi Ras. It's the original all-attractive Ras, the interaction between the male and the female, the ultimate yin and yang, from which everything else has become complete. Ampanam adapanam punam punam udachite. It's not complete if you get to the sun and it's cold and dark. It'd be a real disappointment when it's giving out so much heat and light. You wouldn't be expecting. So why is it that we see so much personality and so much relationship and ras going on in the material world, and we get to the source and it's nothing? It's like, how could that be? If it's coming from the sun, it should be concentrated light and concentrated heat. So we see living entities are clambering around in the material world trying to enjoy a rasa. And if with nobody else, at least with their dog, or even a toy, if they can have a toy and just talk to the toy. One man was talking to a dummy in a shop window once. I remember we were out late at night fundraising, and this man was very intoxicated and he'd not managed to cop off, as they call it. So he was talking to a dummy in the window and he was chatting away, and I was thinking, how sad, he's so desperate for some type of interaction. Because it would have been difficult to have showed him the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam at that point and said, well, actually, what you're looking for is the Adiras. But his conclusion may well be that this is all just nonsense. There's nothing after this. So it's born of frustration. Srila Prabhupada refers actually to this voidist philosophy is born of frustration. So when things go wrong, then people conclude, well, that can't be a God, or if he is, he must be on holiday because everything's gone wrong, So the conclusion is voidism. Well, let's just void him out then. Let's delete him. He can't exist because I can't see how this is him arranging things perfectly. So voidism is born of frustration. And voidism is just another type of Mayavadi. It doesn't really make sense because if there was nothing, if it was all void, and the reason why everything is going wrong now is because there's no meaning to anything and there's no arrangement or systematic intervention of an all-cognizant, omniscient personality, then does that mean then everything just goes back to void? It kind of puts around a little bit in space and then just collapses back into void and then nothing again for eternity. Is that the ultimate conclusion of voidism? We come from nothing. We mess around, and it's not however long it is, even if it's trillions of years. Eventually, it breaks down and falls back into void, and then it's of no use. It was of no consequence. And in eternity, then it doesn't matter how long the space of time is; it's still nothing in eternity. So then that type of philosophy would underlie a lot of mental health problems. which is why there is a lot of mental health problems going on. Yesterday, we went to see a nice man who was giving us these cabins, and we were just kind of reflecting on how things have gone very quickly downhill, especially since the pandemic. And he was in the flower business. And if you do flowers, one of the things you get to know pretty fast is how many funerals there are in town. And so he said in the space of 2 months, there was 8 suicides. And sometimes the people don't even show any signs of it. And maybe they don't even really grasp the gravity of what they're doing. They're just like, I'm just going to pop home a bit early. I'll see you later. And so then he finishes himself off because it's not so intense for him because he doesn't really grasp what it is he's doing. He's just thinking, I'm fed up with this TV channel now. I think I'm just going to switch it over. There'll either be nothing on the other channel or there'll be something better. But it can't be any worse than this because this is a total drag. Let's just check it out. Let's try that channel. So they do it in a very casual way. And then that's actually not the case at all. And so it's a big surprise. So suicide is taken lightly. People don't grasp the significance of suicide because they don't grasp the significance of the human form of life in the first place. So if you're given a very valuable thing and you can't work out how to open it, and so you just throw it in the trash can, then you don't really appreciate the loss, the significance of what you've been given, the value of what you've been given, and the travesty that you've just thrown that away. So our friend yesterday who helps us with porta cabins, being in the flower business, was well aware of, at least in his vicinity, how many suicides had been committed in the space of 2 months. And that was before the pandemic. And they say since the pandemic, things have got a lot worse. In fact, we were driving up for the marathon last year, and we were going through through a place in Dundee. There were some flats, and they have like the window and then the veranda. And about the third or fourth one up, the veranda was all full of furniture, but it wasn't very neatly arranged. And then I noticed that there was no window in the partition from the room and the veranda. So there'd obviously been some kind of a domestic meltdown, and everything had gone through the window. Whether the person himself who'd rearranged the furniture had gone through the window as well, I don't know. But it indicated that there was an intense difficulty there. So mental health, because of this Mayavadi philosophy that Srila Prabhupada is talking about, people don't realize the danger. The danger of atheism isn't just that you don't go to heaven after this, but it's also that it erodes the very fabric of your existence, the very meaning that sustains the human form of life has been eroded away, and things have become meaningless void. So this frustration, voidism is born of frustration, and material life will frustrate. The material energy is designed to frustrate the living entity. The living entity is spiritual by nature, and it cannot find any real satisfaction here. So it's designed, just like you have cars, they have inbuilt obsolescence. So they build cars now, so that after a couple of years, things start creaking and squeaking. And this way, it keeps everyone in business. Inbuilt obsolescence. They say they could build a car that would last a lifetime. But if they build a car that lasts a lifetime, nobody's going to buy any new cars, and no one's going to make any money, or a lot less money. So instead, we'll have inbuilt obsolescence. So if Krishna wanted to, he could have arranged that the material body didn't grow old, that it didn't feel pain, and it was just fun to hop around in all the time. But he's built into it. Just like you have a DNA code, and the DNA code is telling in the cell that at the age of 60, the ripe old age of 60, there's going to be a line appearing here. It's not appearing here because, like, if you get a leather saddle and you do that enough, eventually it will just wrinkle because the leather saddle is dead. So eventually it will. But if you had a leather saddle that could regenerate itself every 7 years, why would the DNA have a code imprinted in it that at the age of 60, all these lines will start appearing and the body will start sagging and the knees will start creaking and the muscle mass will reduce so that when you go to lift your leg, the leg doesn't go as high as you think and you trip over something. My mum's just had a fall now because she was walking along. She thought she'd taken the step. She hadn't, and she fell. And she hasn't broken her ribs, but she says it feels like she's broken her ribs, you know. So why design a body like that? All the cells are going to regenerate every 7 years. All the cells could get together and say, listen, guys, let's stop this wrinkle business. You fill in the gaps in the corner of the eyes. You make sure the muscle is okay. Let's keep this thing running. Inbuilt obsolescence. And Krishna's put it like that so that we become frustrated. And we look for we realize, actually, you know, I don't think I belong here in this material world. But rather than being the platform for frustration and Maya voidism, then we look, okay, so what is the Adiras? What is the original relationship that everyone's clamoring about for? Where do we find that really? And it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada refers in the first canto that the most intimate form of affection is that between the beloved and the served, this intimacy of being a servant, which has become so sadly abused in the material world. When a person submits himself and becomes compliant as a servant, if the master is worthy of that worship and respect, then he's able to reciprocate in such a way that the servant feels very, very satisfied and very fulfilled. That's what devotional service is all about. The more we have love for Krishna, the more we do it with that loving sentiment, the more the satisfaction and the reciprocation can take place. So Srila Prabhupada's referring that the theory of Mayavad school is very dangerous because it will turn people towards atheism. And then this atheism becomes the foundation for mental health problems. All the different mental health problems are arising because of this inability to see the hand. Kadamba Kanna Maharaj was saying, before you see the face of God, you see the hand of God. That's the first thing you see, the hand. That was the arrangement of God. Everything is happening by the arrangement of God. So the first step in connecting with this reality is to see the hand. And then when you see the hand, you realize, well, if there's a hand, there must be an arm behind the hand. And the arm must be connected to a body. And the body must have a face. I wonder what that face must look like of the hand that is arranging everything. So this is the dawning of Krishna consciousness. And eventually, one fine day, we get darshan of the Lord. And as we see the Lord, we see ourselves and who we are in relation to the Lord. And then we realize our swarup at the stage of bhav. And then our devotional service becomes spontaneous. So Srila Prabhupada makes that point that it's dangerous. And on the strength of this theory, one thinks that he is God. So people may not be going around and standing on pedestals and saying, worship me, I am God. But although they don't realize it, subconsciously that's what's going on. They are putting themselves in the position of being the center of the universe. Everything revolves around me. I am the enjoyer and I am the controller. In fact, another mental health condition is schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is a symptom of schizophrenia is that everything is being arranged around you. There was one man who was schizophrenic, and he was convinced that the council were taking all the houses down at night. And just before he woke up in the morning, they were building all the houses up ready for him. And then at night, all the houses were dismantled. And then in the morning, they were all built up again. So that's like an intense dose of thinking you're the center of the universe and everything revolves around you. So because of that mistaken paradigm of the way things are. There's two paradigms, the way things are and the way things should be. And for a lot of people, they don't have either right. The way things are aren't actually the way things are, and the way things should be aren't actually the way things should be. So anyway, we can become more aware of how things really are and how things really should be by reading the pages of the Bhagavatam. And as we've just been reading in the Leelamrita, Srila Prabhupada is saying that we have to distribute the books, and then we have to ensure that people read the books. And we can only ensure that people are reading the books if we're able to assimilate the information ourselves. And we're able to help them appreciate the significance of what's being said in the books, and helping them to implement it to show that Krishna consciousness does work. Because Krishna consciousness does work, but Krishna consciousness has to be applied in order for it to work. So I guess some people could be showing you how Krishna consciousness works by doing it properly, and some people could be showing you how Krishna consciousness works by not doing it properly. Because then you think, wow, well, because he's doing it like this, which is wrong, therefore he looks pretty miserable and he's complaining all the time. So my tatamidam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina, the fact is that the entire cosmic manifestation is an expansion of the Lord's energies, which are manifested in the physical elements and the living entities. So the separated Bhumirapo Vayu Kamana, the separated earth, water, fire, ether, that's the separated energy, the unconscious energy, the pradhan, and then the jiva, the living entity that's conscious. Both are energies coming from Krishna. So they're thinking that these elements are resources for their enjoyment. So it's interesting, they don't just think the pradhan is for their enjoyment, but they also think the other jivas are for their enjoyment. And so they're eating the other jivas, or exploiting the other jivas, or trying to enjoy the other jivas, and they want to consider themselves as being in a position which is better than the other jivas, and that they have this privilege to be able to exert their will and desire upon others. So it's not just the material energy that's getting it, it's also the other jivas. They're all struggling to try and get one up on each other. And so you have this continual tension going on, different people trying to be king of the castle, and then he gets dragged down and somebody else comes up as king of the castle. And all this is going on, and the castle itself is the material energy, and then there's jivas being used to build the castle, jivas being used to tear down the castle, jivas being used to kill other jivas. So quite a mess that's going on. However, neither of them is independent. They are both energies of the Lord. So interesting that the jiva also is not independent, although the jiva is a conscious entity. He's still so dependent upon the Lord to help him breathe, help him process the blood into bone marrow, help him to eat, and even remembering, even his ability to remember is actually sanctioned by the Lord. If the Lord doesn't want him to remember, then he forgets. So how intimately we're connected with the Lord, how much he is integral to what's going on around us. And Krishna consciousness is to take a step back and see how all this is being arranged by the Lord. The original cause for the material energy and the spiritual energy is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, although the expansion of the Lord's energies, actually there was one, Albert Einstein, he made the statement, he said, there's two things that I'm not sure which are unlimited. One is the universe, and the other one is man's stupidity. And he said, I'm more convinced about the latter than the former. Because if the universe is limited, then there must be a point where it comes to the edge. And then, of course, the obvious question is, what's beyond the edge? However, although the expansion of the Lord's energies is the original cause, one should not think that the Lord himself is expanded in different ways. So Srila Prabhupada's distinguishing. He's distinguishing that, okay, the Lord does pervade everything, but it's not like having a piece of paper and you cut it up into pieces and then you end up with no original piece of paper. Or like you have a candle and as soon as you light the other candle, the original candle goes out. So the Lord can expand and still remain independent and separate. And that's where the Mayavadi philosophy goes wrong, because they don't believe that that's possible. So to condemn the theories of Mayavadis, the Lord clearly says in the Bhagavad Gita, Matstani Savabhutani Najaham Tesha Vishtita. So Bhagavad Gita is full of, the Shastra is full of astra, it's full of weapons. And we are at battle actually. And Nevashesha Sunyavadi. This is our mission. And to conquer Mayavad and impersonalism. And Bhagavad Gita has the weapons, and we need to learn. Sri Ramash has just been saying recently, he's giving class at Mayapad, he was saying, how many devotees study Srila Prabhupada? Well, how many even read them to begin with? Those that read them on a regular basis, how many study Srila Prabhupada's books? Because Srila Prabhupada went to the painstaking care of providing us with the Sanskrit, what the Sanskrit means, and then finally a translation and then a purport. So very comprehensive. And he didn't spend all that time and energy doing that for us to just skip over it. And just, I'll just read the texts. I can't be bothered going through the purports. I just want to get the story, But by understanding the verses and the way the Sanskrit is constructed, then we have a very powerful weapon then that we can use to conquer over impersonalism and Mayavadi. And that is the battle that's going on actually right now. We have different philosophies influencing people in different ways and confusing people. And we have less problems with ourselves and others if we're more concerned with preaching and going out and sharing Krishna consciousness with others, actually. It was so refreshing yesterday. I'm not getting to go out as much as I used to, but it's nice to just go out and touch bases with somebody who's intelligent enough to kind of come across things. And also Josh later as well. He was he's trying to live his life in accordance with how he thinks God wants to direct him. So people are trying to be Krishna conscious anyway. They're doing in their own way. They're trying to connect. They're trying to see how God's hand is there behind everything and understanding what it is that God wants them to do. And so it's nice to go out and just validate realizations that they're having about God and Krishna consciousness. You don't have to be in a temple with tilak and a dhoti on to get realizations that God exists and you have a relationship with him. It can certainly help. But Krishna consciousness is going on all the time. And we're just helping people to give the terminology with which to clarify the situation so they can see it more clearly. I remember the first time I came in contact with devotees, and it was the first time I'd spoken to people that could make sense of what it was that I was experiencing and kind of realizing about life. Up until then, I went on a bit of a quest before I became a devotee, and I hung out with different religious people, and so they didn't quite hit the mark for me until I met the devotees, and the devotees were really speaking a language that I could understand, and it really connected with what was going on in my life. So it was a big relief to have that happen. And so we have to share that experience with others, and also it helps us to appreciate how much knowledge we actually have. We maybe don't appreciate that. If you have water in a pot over a long period of time, it stagnates. But if the water is always flowing, then you've got to keep filling the pot and then distributing it. In fact, that's what Vyasaki Prabhu was saying. Become Krishna conscious and then distribute the overflow. So you fill yourself up so much with Krishna consciousness, and then you distribute the overflow. You go and share it with others. So there has to be an overflow for you to be able to share it. If your pot's only half full and it's stagnating, then if you do pour it out, no one's going to be interested anyway. Any questions or comments? I'll read the translation if anybody has any. In this world of matter, which the conditioned soul accepts as consisting of enjoyable resources, the conditioned soul expands, thinking that he is the enjoyer of the material world. Similarly, the material world expands in the living entity as a source of enjoyment. In this way, they both expand. But because they are my energies, they are both pervaded by me. As the Supreme Lord, I am the cause of these effects, and one should know that both of them rest in me.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu. So we hear that the world, material world in itself is not sustainable. And then another side, if we hear like, okay, they can make car which will run for long and longer period. So can they actually manufacture something which can run for like at least one's lifetime fully and not get broken down?
Yeah, there's a lot of things they can do actually. They can make a razor blade that never blunts, or only after a very long period of time. They're making an electric light bulb that never runs out. And they can make an engine. I met the man actually, he was in Kelso, and he was explaining to me, he'd found a way to make the piston explode in the chamber a fraction of a second before it does, which means you get a third more use of fuel. And he went to the oil companies, and they just chased him. They said, "What are you kidding?" You know. Or they went to some companies that are related anyway, and they said, "Well, that's no good. We'll lose money." The criterion is financial viability outweighs sustainability. If it's financially viable, that's the main consideration, you know, and that's why things break down. Of course, ultimately, nothing really certainly doesn't last the lifetime of Brahma. It only lasts for a certain. I mean, there's a devastation at the end of every Brahma's day, so nothing lasts longer than a devastation. Everything gets washed out, then it gets reconstructed again the next time, you know. But it can give the appearance of something which lasts for a long time if it outlasts your lifetime. But your lifetime is very, very puny in the grand scale of things. But isn't it a shame that they shoot themselves in the foot, that they're prepared to sacrifice the quality of life for financial viability? Rather than having something good of value, they have a small commodity of something good, we'd sooner have a large lot of rubbish stuff. Take away the gold ring and I'll give you 1,000 plastic ones in its place. But the fact that you've got 1,000 of them doesn't make the plastic ring any more valuable. So we can give you cheap, lots of cheap and cheerful. We'll give you more, cheaper. So that's unfortunately what's going on. The food. They reckon the reason why the average American is so obese, which is the biggest killer in America, obesity, is because there's so little nutrition left in the food that in order for them to feel satisfied, they have to eat 3 times the amount to feel satisfied. And of course, because of that, they bulk out because there's no real nourishment or goodness in the food. So they have a lot more food now than they used to have, but the food has less nutrition than it did when they didn't have so much food. And that's progress. We're going to have more, but it's going to be more rubbish as well. And there's a story, it's what happens in the end is this story, they come up with this film that the planet gets trashed and they can't grow anything on it. So all the humans have to go up into space, the few that are still left, and they float around in the spaceship. And for hundreds of years, they keep going down and checking the soil to see if they can grow something, and it's still too toxic. And then finally, when they do come down, one little seed starts to grow, and so they can come down now and start farming. By the time they come down, they've been in space for so long, born in space, that they can't hold their bodies up to the weight of gravity. So they're all flopping about, and they're all unhealthy. And so it's not the present approach to exploiting the material energy is non-sustainable. It's not sustainable. And this idea of, well, we'll trash the planet and then go to another planet and we can go and trash that. That's not a sustainable philosophy. And that doesn't work either for mental health. As I'm sure our gardeners will tell us, the reason why they're so enthusiastic because they're out there growing things. And that's a tremendous... I was reading a book about mental health, actually. And one of the therapies is to get people gardening. When you get back to nature and you see things growing, then it has a very uplifting effect on yourself. You get very excited when you see my marigolds are just starting to come up now. I'm really excited, you know. It's a little bit, to me, gardening is a little bit like a very slow firework display. And all the colors suddenly come out, and all the fragrances and the fruits. It takes longer, but it lasts longer as well. So these are miracles, you know, that this is happening. Just now, Colin's given me his chili plant, so I'm getting a fresh chili every day. And you know, the chili is super hot. How do you get that out of soil? You know, if you break the soil down molecule by molecule, where is that really, really spicy hot thing that makes it go almost like acid when you're biting it? Where does that come from? You know, that's a miracle that's taking place there. If you could give a scientist a pot of soil and ask him to come back with a chili, if he managed it, he'd get a Nobel Prize, right? Wow, he managed it. He managed to make we gave him a load of soil and he's come back with this red chili. Absolutely amazing, you know. So gardening helps us to connect with nature, to connect with and see the hand of God, the miracle of creation that's taking place all around us. And it helps us to appreciate that this is how we live, this is how we sustain ourselves. We grow enough to eat, and we eat what we grow, and that's how we sustain ourselves. And we can keep doing that generation after generation, you know, as they have done. We used to live, Srila Prabhupada, I'm just listening right now, and he's saying, why are we giving up all our resources to make Goodyear tires? We cannot eat the Goodyear tire, Goodyear subji. It's we're prepared to sacrifice so much for this so-called advancement that we're going to make, but then we end up eating food which is practically like eating a Goodyear tire, because there's no goodness left in it. They did a program, actually, I won't say which brand it was, but they did a program on fast foods. And they actually found, when they analyzed the food, that there was more nutrition in the cardboard box that the food was being delivered in than in the food. So it might taste better, but no goodness.
In the original Sanskrit verse and the word for word, the word kritam is translated as create because it means the same thing and it sounds the same also.
Oh,
Like the word kritam means to do or to perform, and krit sounds almost like create as well. It shows you a kind of connection between the languages there, and the purpose and the meaning of both of them.
Yeah, I remember Mukunda Maharaj was saying that when he first came in contact with Srila Prabhupada, he was very impressed with how Srila Prabhupada was so fluent in the Sanskrit language. And it does have a very powerful effect, actually, if a person is reciting some Sanskrit verse and he knows the meaning of the words and the significance of the words, then it has a very powerful effect, like we do sadhana. And sadhana is dan, treasure, and sa means to bestow. So every morning we get to bestow from 4:30 through to 8:30. For 4 hours, we're bestowing upon ourselves great fortune. It's like winning the lottery every morning for 4 hours. And then you get all these amazing prizes by doing it. So sadhana and astra, weapon, and shastra. The shastra is full of weapons to dispel the illusory energy. So just like you on the battlefield, they have particular ways of breaking the formations so that they can get through the battle, you know. Like Abhimanyu knew how to break through, but he couldn't come back out. So we have a mantra that can break through the material energy, can dispel the illusion. If we chant the mantra properly, then it will dispel the illusion. And of course, the biggest illusion is producing fear. It produces fear in the living entity. And the devotees were asking Srila Prabhupada, what is it that you feel when you're chanting Hare Krishna? And Prabhupada said, I feel fearless. So when we're chanting Hare Krishna nicely, and we're hearing it nicely, then it dispels all our fear. We become free from fear. So that's like being on the battlefield and having such a good weapon that every time someone tries to attack you, you have this amazing machine gun, and it doesn't need to be refilled. You just keep pulling the trigger. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And so then you become quite fearless, wouldn't you? If you had that type of an astra. Anyway, Shastra is loaded with astras, and it's very, very important that we understand before we can actually hear the holy name. We have to hear about the holy name. Otherwise, you will not be able to hear the holy name properly. So the Shastra is there to show us how to hear the holy name properly. Then when you hear the holy name properly, you're able to access the most powerful weapon and destroy, in Kali Yuga anyway, destroy the influence of the illusory energy and become fearless. Abhayam. Jai. Iskon Gurvinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Gaura Premanandi. Haribo. All of you ki jai. Haribo.